This Western Australian Supreme Court case followed a taxi accident in late 1945. Miss Martin was the passenger in the taxi and Mr. Isbard was the taxi driver. In the accident, Miss Martin struck her head and was taken to Perth Hospital. That's where things begin to get interesting. Miss Martin suffered a concussion in the accident. However, an X-ray was taken and examined by the resident radiologist, who suggested a possible skull fracture. Miss Martin was told this, and naturally enough, she found this news distressing. She returned to work briefly, but experienced periods of dizziness and headaches, so she stopped work after a few weeks and went to her parents' place in Melbourne to recover. A few months later, the X-ray was reviewed. They determined the initial assessment had been an error. There was no skull fracture at all. Miss Martin was told this, and a few weeks later she had a second X-ray taken in Melbourne. Again, the radiologist found a possible skull fracture. That assessment was then reviewed and was found to be a completely inexcusable mistake. A final X-ray just before the trial made it absolutely clear that there was not and had never been any skull fracture. The court found that the effects of the concussion would have been brief and temporary. The longer-term effects of dizziness and headaches were more likely stress-induced because Miss Martin continued to believe that she had a broken skull. The question for the court was how much responsibility the taxi driver ought to bear for all this. On the one hand, the harm caused by his negligence was over in a few hours. But on the other hand, if it wasn't for his negligence, there would have been no X-rays, no suggestion of a broken skull, and no distress. Ultimately, the court found that the two poor X-ray assessments were each a Novus actus interveniens, a new intervening action. Most of Miss Martin's distress was due to the doctor's negligence, not that of the taxi driver. Justice Walker said, "The anxiety in the plaintiff was induced not by the original accident, but by the erroneous belief created in her mind by bad medical advice that she had suffered a fracture of the skull." As a result, the taxi driver was not liable for the distress caused by the fractured skull diagnosis.